make a video on what some people call Black English, and in linguistics we say African American Vernacular English. When I was a kid, I just literally thought the way that black people spoke was bad or wrong. I thought the way that my mom spoke was wrong, actually, because she has a pretty strong Southern accent, and I imagine I had a stronger Southern accent as a child, but I always tell people they educated it out of me. Turns out that it's not wrong, and the way my mom speaks isn't wrong, it's just different. And I wanted to explain what makes it different and what exactly a dialect is and why dialect isn't a bad word, even though some people say that, oh, that's just a dialect, it's not an actual language, and has some negative connotations for some people. So a dialect is just a way of speaking. Like, if we think about how language works, what you speak is just a continuation of how your ancestors or the people in the area you live in spoke and evolved over hundreds of years. So what we speak now is just a result of hundreds of years of change. There's nothing inherently good or bad about how anyone speaks. It's just a lot of the times when someone is in a higher position than someone else, the way they speak is considered to be in a higher position. If you take English, for example, in Great Britain, there's an accent called received pronunciation, or a dialect rather. That is your standard British English that you think of when an American tries to copy a British person. You know, they drop their R's and they sound high class. And you even sound smarter when you do it. But there's really nothing actually smarter or better about it. It's just those were the rich people in England, and they didn't even speak like that hundreds of years ago. It's just their dialect has been put in a prestigious position because they themselves are prestigious. You look at the Cockney Dialect in London, that's considered low class. It's something that low class people speak. You couldn't imagine a rich, educated person speaking it, but there's actually nothing inherently wrong with it. They both omit words, they both change pronunciations of words from how they're spelled. They're just different. And it's the same with all the dialects we have in the United States. Black English is just different. A dialect almost all of the time has its own rules and regularity. It's consistent. Black English and Southern English have their own consistent rules. There is no randomness to them. So if we look at Black English, some examples, I use a phrase called fixing to, or fixin to, which just means I'm about to do something. I'm fixing to go to the store. I'm about to go to the store. Black English, that's shortened to finna. And that's just like going to, shortened to gonna, in almost everyone's American English dialect. Some people would say that's bad, but then they themselves would just shorten words all the time. And it's only bad because it's a less prestigious dialect. Another example, with changes to wit. That happens in lots of languages. The TH sound, the th or the, is incredibly hard to say in most languages. It's only common in maybe a few dozen languages of the world. It's natural for humans to want to shorten that. There's no reason that it exists in our dialect other than complete randomness, honestly. If we take the word axe, for example, we say ask. Some people who speak African American Vernacular English would say axe. Turns out axe has a history that's several hundred years old. Even in the 1400s, when Chaucer was writing poetry, he himself used the word axe. And if that's not a word, I don't know what is if it was used in the 1400s. So if you just look at the rules, you'll see that all of our distinctions and misconceptions are completely arbitrary. And this is a huge shame because I have my own example of why this is a terrible attitude to have. When I was a child, my younger, probably more racist self who grew up in Georgia, I had a black friend when I was in high school, and we had honors classes together. That's what we call the advanced level classes here. You go to a different classroom than what we called the normal kids. Anyway, I thought he was a really smart guy, and I noticed that when he talked to a lot of his black friends, he would switch dialects. And I thought it was kind of a shame. I was like, oh no, he's normally so smart. Why is he talking like this now? It's so bad that in order to look cool, he's got to talk like that. Like, it's so terrible. But when I go back and look, I realize it's the opposite. It's a shame that when he speaks to me, I have to expect him to talk like I do in order for me to think that he's intelligent. He should be able to speak the way he normally speaks without me having a value judgment on that. And I do understand, especially as someone with a lot of Southern relatives, that it's normal to want to hide your accent. And even if people only consider it less prestigious and it's not actually less prestigious, it can still affect you in your normal everyday life. I don't remember who this was, but there was a black comedian who said black people in America speak two languages. They speak what they normally speak at home, and then they speak job interview. And it kind of sucks. Imagine if the way your entire family speaks, the way you grew up speaking, was considered bad by the majority of your society. You grew up and you learned that the way you talked was wrong and you have to change that in order to get a job. It's a really bad thing. And there's still a lot of people who in America who think that it's not a racist attitude to think that black English is bad. They think, well, I don't dislike black people. I just think a lot of black people speak a bad variety of English. It's just simply not true, and we should really all try to change our attitudes to combat this. And in some places, in Nigeria, they speak a dialect or pidgin English that they themselves call broken. Literally, the name of their language for themselves is broken, and that's just kind of horrible. It's just different. There's nothing wrong with that. That's not to say there aren't people who speak broken English. There are people who are in the process of learning English and they don't speak it very well. Those people exist, and there are a lot of English speakers that way, but people who grew up speaking their own native variety of English do not speak broken English. They just speak a different version of English. Everyone should really realize there is no such thing as standard English. There maybe is some kind of nebulous dialect that we call standard English that is prestigious in America, but no one language is really better or worse than another, and one dialect isn't inherently better or worse. You can have all the opinions you want, but there's no evidence. It's all a completely arbitrary distinction on what we consider is good and bad.